Android users, you can now have TYT in the palm of your hand. Our TYT app is available for download in the Google Play Store. Just go to tyt.com/app to find out more.
Earlier this year, the UN had released a study into the economic situation in the United States. And for most people living in the United States, it was unsurprising that the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights found that 40 million Americans are poor and more than 5 million live in third world conditions. So when that study came out, the Trump administration was angry. And they were angry because they keep riding this wave of a false, positive economy narrative. In reality, if you look at the economy, it's not doing well, but Trump keeps touting his tax cuts. He keeps talking about how the unemployment rate is low. He never wants to talk about wages. But this study looked into the economy on a deeper level and found, hey, a lot of people are actually really struggling under Trump's economic policies. So Trump's response to this, the White House's response, was that the study was inaccurate, inflammatory, and irresponsible. So usually what happens, and it certainly was the case with this story, the White House releases a response. And so the Trump administration wanted to respond to it and try to prove that the information in the study was inaccurate. But what ended up happening, based on this great investigative story by Foreign Policy, was they decided to just ignore their own economists when they left notes on the margins of drafts for this response. Okay, so I'll give you examples. So according to the internal State Department emails and a document obtained by Foreign Policy and CODA story, the economic officials consulted on a draft of the rebuttal questioned the accuracy of the data the administration was citing. So next to a line in the draft which reads, "The US is entering a new era of economic growth and prosperity," an official from the White House Council of Economic Advisors remarked that the economic growth had long predated Trump and said the trajectory might not last. So the notes specifically said this, and the Trump administration totally ignored it. Already 8 to 9 years long, which started under Obama and we inherited and then expanded. But it will end probably in 1 to 2 years, so I'd not get into this. So look, an economic crash, if we keep going the way that we are, is coming. And so these economic advisors are very well aware of that. And they're like, be cool, don't include that in that because it's gonna be bad, right?
And notice that person is clearly on the Trump team. It says, we expanded the economics. So it's not a liberal, it's not a progressive, bragging about how they expanded their recovery. But he's like, but don't talk about it. One, because it's gonna crash. That's what they apparently think internally, but never tell you. And number two is, it doesn't look that great for us because it's actually been going on for 8 or 9 years under Obama, and he's right about that. The economy has added jobs for 93 straight months. So it clearly started under Obama in the beginning of October of 2010 and has been going ever since. Now you could say, hey, to be fair, the unemployment's at 3.9%, and that's a very low number, and it has continued under Trump. That's a fair point to make. But wages have declined when you take inflation into account.
Yes.
And to say that you started it, well, that's preposterous. So they write in the margins, don't say that, that's not true. And I know you're gonna be shocked. Turns out they said it anyway.
They did. So, but I want to give you more examples because it gives you a sense of how little this administration really cares about the reality of our economic situation. At one point, the draft asserts that people experiencing a housing crisis in a community have fair and equal access and are connected to available housing and related assistance based on their strengths and needs. Now, the note that was left said something different. An official from the Council of Economic Advisors wrote, "Massive waiting list for vouchers, not sure this is our strong suit." In other words, don't include this is a bad idea. Same thing happened when the Trump administration wanted to brag about how much they've helped Puerto Rico after the hurricane. So the draft also noted the $18 billion that had been allocated to Puerto Rico, and the economic advisor essentially wrote, "Pretty sure that's peanuts compared to what the mainland got, so you may want to rethink this."
I love the language they use. Pretty sure it's peanuts. That's a very technical economic language for you people.
I mean, they know.
The audience.
They know.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is just, I think, that is so hurtful about it, is that they know. They know the truth and they are willfully disguising it. And if you cared about this country, you would care that 40 million Americans are poor. You would care that 5 million Americans are living in third world conditions. And we would do something to address it. But because you don't care about these 40 million people, you don't want to acknowledge them and you don't want to talk about them.
So Alexandria, that's a great point, because their first instinct is, how do I brag? Their first instinct is not, how do I look out for Americans? He's supposed to be the president of the United States, the president of all of us. If I saw, in the funny situation where I would be president, if I saw, hey, 40 million Americans are hungry, I wouldn't think, who's blaming me? Who's blaming me, right? I would think, how do we help them? But it never even occurs to them. The question is, how do we frame it in a way so it doesn't look like they're actually in poverty and that we're awesome? And so one more thing on wages. One of the officials noted, wages haven't really picked up other than for supervisors.
Ooh.
And then went on to say, this triggers the left, best to leave it off.
Okay, let's stop for a second. I think that characterizing this as something that triggers the left is actually inaccurate, because even left-leaning news organizations continuously regurgitate these false talking points from the right wing about how our economy is doing so great. Oh my God, the GDP grew by 4.1% in the last quarter. No, but how? How did it grow? No one talks about that. No one talks about the record amount of consumer debt Americans are in right now. Yeah, Americans did spend on retail during the last quarter. The GDP did grow, but it only grew because farmers had to export soybeans ahead of schedule because of this trade war. And more importantly, Americans had to take out more debt to buy the bare necessities of life. So that's what's really going on. But the media doesn't go into that. Even the left-leaning media. I didn't see MSNBC covering that.
Are they left-leaning? Is that what we're saying?
I mean, they claim they are, but I think that it's something that triggers progressives. Let's just be completely honest about that.
No, I'll go further though. It actually, if they use the derogatory word triggers, but another word for that is concern. You know who's concerned about wages being stagnant? The whole country, right? The whole middle of the country, your voters, all the voters. That's why they voted for Alexandria, and partly why they voted for Trump, because Trump lied to them and said, I'm gonna help you with your wages, et cetera. Now your wages are down when you take inflation into account, and they go, best not to mention that because it triggers people. How about instead you do something about it?
And the reality is that all this job growth that has happened in the last, 8 or 9 years, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of the jobs have been these crappy kind of low-wage temp freelance jobs with no benefits, no security, no nothing, which is, it technically is a job. It's better than not having a job, but it's not a real meaningful, like it's not a way to live without, the fear of losing your job the next day or the week after.
Actually, the number of Americans who are now taking on multiple jobs has increased, right? And so, if you're making a decent, livable wage, you're not gonna need to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. But we're seeing more and more people taking on more work just so they can make up for the fact that their employers refuse to pay them a living wage. And also, look, you look at the stock market, that's where those tax cuts are going, right? Like, oh, but the stock market's doing so well. You think the majority of the middle class, even the working class, is investing in stocks? No, it's these corporate executives who are taking their tax cuts and artificially inflating stock prices by doing stock buybacks. That's what's really going on. And they can keep playing these games and pretending as if everything's hunky-dory as long as they want. But I think Americans in general are waking up, to Cenk's point, and they're aware of what's really going on.
The most powerful story that I've heard about this recently was Kanyela Ng, who's running out in Hawaii. Shout out, his election is August 11th.
Yep.
If you want to help him, go to justicedemocrats.com/candidates and phone bank.
That's right.
But one of the things that Kanyela said was that he was knocking on doors, and he was going into one of the more poverty-stricken areas of his district, and he knocked on this woman's door and he said, hey, if you had a $15 minimum wage, would you quit your second job? And she said, no, but I would quit my third.
Whoa.
Wow, and that's the state of America. And they're saying, hey, don't say it because it triggers the left.
Yeah.
So last thing on this is this story is mainly about how they're ignoring their own economic advisors, but the heart of the story is how their whole effort is to lie to you and to manipulate the actual data and evidence to make sure you don't find out the truth. And the truth is, as Alexandria pointed out, and Kanyella and all the Just Democrats talk about, is your wages are too low.
Yeah.
And they've been artificially suppressed. Corporations have too much power. It's not that they shouldn't exist, but should they be able to buy off politicians through campaign donations and independent expenditures? Of course they shouldn't. And when they do, what do you think they're gonna use that power for? To help you or to keep your wages lower? That's why the Just Democrats don't take any corporate PAC money. And so you can actually trust them that they have your best interests in mind. And so, as you can see here from this great investigative report, the people inside the Trump administration do not have your best interests in mind. They just think, how can we manipulate you so that you think we're doing a good job when we know internally we're not?
I'm finally convinced. I was on the fence.
Oh, okay, all right, finally.
This report really put me over the edge.
All right, well, I want to thank Alexandria for being here. It was amazing.
Awesome.
And I want to thank all you guys too, as she did earlier in the show. tyt.com/join. That's how you become a member. You get all of our shows. If you missed any portion of this show, you can get it there as well. And you make this possible. So for all of the help that you've given to the Just Democrats, to Wolfpack, to all these efforts to help fellow progressives, thank you guys to all the Young Turks members that make it possible. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.